Good morning, Dr. Charles.
Good morning, madam. How are you, madam?
Fine, I'm fine. We are very happy that you are here with us. We are looking forward to your talk.
Yeah. Thank you, ma'am. Even I'm very happy to join this, event. And yes, definitely, I'm ready to go. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Great.
A very good morning to all of you. On behalf of our director, Dr. Vandana Prasad, I, Dr. Viveshveer Kapoor, member, Scientific Events Coordination Committee, welcome you all to the 7th Dr. K.R. Sorange Memorial Lecture on the occasion of the 101st birth anniversary of late Dr. Krishna Rajaram Sorange, who was the former director, BSIP. We also warmly welcome Dr. Bipin Charles, who has been associated with the Ashoka Trust for Research in Ecology and Environment, that is at TREE, Bangalore, and is presently the director in KMS Group, Bangalore, for the Department of Remote Sensing, GIS, and AFOLU services, and who is also the speaker of the day. Thank you, Dr. Charles, for accepting our earlier invite to deliver the 7 Dr. KR Memorial Lecture. Given the
Thank you.
COVID-19 pandemic, we are for the first time conducting this function online in fond memory of late Dr. K.R. Sorange. We shall be recording today's event, and the YouTube link for the same will be shared with you all in a day or two. May I now request our director, Dr. Vandana Prasad, to pay floral tributes to late Dr. K.R. Sorange. I now request our director, Dr. Vandana Prasad, to share her views with the audience on this auspicious occasion.
Good morning, everybody, and I'm very happy to Dr. Bipin Charles. He's here to deliver K.R. Sorange Memorial Lecture. Dr. K.R. Sorange, he was one of the greatest paleobotanists of this country. He has done his PhD under Professor Birbal Sahni, and when he was doing his postdoctoral research in Cambridge University, he was appointed as associate professor in this institute. After the sudden and unfortunate death of Professor Birbal Sahni, Dr. Sorange, he has taken this institute in a manner in the same line as Professor Sahni dreamt of. And he was actually a visionary, and the professor, Dr. K.R. Sorange, he used to believe that have a firm basis. And hence, during his long tenure as director, he has actually built this institute, and he diversified the paleobotanical research so well, and that the same discipline, same labs and different areas still exist today. So we are very happy today that, it's our privilege to have Sorange Memorial Lecture every year, and we are very happy that Dr. Bipin Charles is here today with us. I welcome you, Dr. Charles, and it's a very nice topic which you have chosen, the species distribution modeling, which is a very upcoming area in the field of paleobotany also. And it's important because it helps in bridging the gap between the past, present, and future. So I think with those lecture is going to be very beneficial for all those who are working in quaternary. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. May I now request Dr. Santosh Shah, who is the convener, Scientific Events Coordination Committee, to provide audience with some information on the lecture series and professional life and conduct of late Dr. K.R. Surange.
Respected and Director Madam and Mr. Sab of the SIP, and a very good morning to all of you. It's my honor to share some information about very important Dr. K.R. Surange today. Dr. Krishna Rajaram Surange was born on the day 7th of February in the year 1920 in Ujjain, Madhya Pradesh. He completed his undergraduate in Lucknow, and while he was a student at Lucknow University, he came in contact with Professor Birbal Sahani, then professor and head of the Department of Botany, and was soon impressed not only by Professor Sahani's personality, but also with the subject that he taught. In 1943, he completed his MSc in Botany from Lucknow University, and within a year, he had published a paper in Nature, and later completed his PhD under the guidance of Professor Sahni in 1947. The work which was carried out by him during his PhD is of great significance even today, as it documented the presence of South American plants in the Deccan Intertrappean volcano sedimentary sequence during a brief interval of the late Cretaceous and early Paleocene at the time when India was northwardly drifting island subcontinent. After his PhD, he joined the Cambridge School of Botany under Henry F. Thomas and completed his second PhD in 1949. The work carried out in Cambridge is an important contribution to paleobotany and finds place in many textbooks as it sheds light on rooting and seed reproductive system in the early evolution of land plants. After completion of two PhDs, he was first appointed reader in the fledgling Paleobotany Institute in 1949, and after the sudden and unexpected demise of Professor Birbal Sahani, he was appointed Assistant Director BSIP in 1952. He served in various capacities and was the director from 1953 to 1980. Under his leadership, BSIP attained great acclaim as one of the few research centers in paleobotany in the world. This was mainly because of his own personal initiative and the band of dedicated research workers that he had nurtured to constantly strive the excellence. Later in 1980, Dr. Surange also served at Agarkar Research Institute, Pune as a director and gave all his energy and experience to his new assignment for 5 years. Among the major scientific contributions, Dr. Surange has done morphological studies on two genera of the small South American family, Cyclanthaceae, and its fossil counterpart in India. He worked on Conopteris fons, Butyropteris, and Tauropteris. He discovered heterospory in Tauropteris, Vernetis landica, which is one of the earliest fern-like plants, and he carried out detailed studies on the male and female reproductive organ of Glossopteris complex and on the variation pattern of type species of Indian Glossopteris. He also authored a monograph of Indian fossil pteridophytes. Dr. Surange's involvement in scientific issues at the national and international level is evidenced by the fact that he was an active member of various organizations and committees worldwide. He was elected as fellow of all three Indian science academies as well as the founder member of Paleobotanical Society and was played a key role in the establishment of the BSIP. He breathed his last on 6th January 2010, which was a great loss to the scientific community and his family, friends, and colleagues. So, in memory of this great paleobotanist and in his honor, a memorial lecture was established by the BSIP in the year 2015. In this connection, an eminent scientist delivers memorial lecture every year on paleobotany and allied aspects. So this year, 7th Dr. K.R. Surange Memorial Lecture will be delivered by Dr. Vipin Charles, who was from ATRI Bangalore and presently serves as a director. And I congratulate you, sir, for this award. And thank you very much. And now I request my colleague, Dr. Kapoor, to take over the remaining proceedings. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shah. It is with pleasure that I now provide a brief introduction of today's speaker, that is Dr. Vipin Charles. Dr. Vipin Charles is currently serving as a director in KMS Group, Bangalore, with the Department of Remote Sensing GIS in AFOLU services. To date, Dr. Charles has carried out more than 30 projects in applications of GIS and remote sensing in conservation biology. His broad expertise ranges from supporting greenhouse gas emission reduction projects on the ground to advising financial institutions and multilateral organizations and governments in their carbon procurement and climate related strategies. Prior to joining KSM Group, Dr. Charles worked with Ashoka Trust for Research in Ecology and Environment, that is ATRI Bangalore, as an expert in the subject area of remote sensing, GIS, and niche modeling. During his tenure in ATRI, he has successfully completed several critical projects covering land use, land cover change modeling, environmental impact assessment, ecological niche modeling. Dr. Charles has delivered more than 25 training workshops in remote sensing, GIS, and species distribution modeling organized by reputed institutes such as Indian Statistical Institute, ISI Kolkata, University of Agricultural Sciences in Bangalore, and many others. Dr. Charles also has vast experience in end-to-end project management in large banking operations and leading business process re-engineering projects. His key achievements include distinction of winning Earthwatch Small Grants Program as part of HSBC Corporate Social Responsibility Program in view of development of a project called Lantana Conservation Program with ATRI to enhance the livelihood of women in Thekadi in Kerala. He has been winner of HSBC Earthwatch Fellowship. As part of this program, he assisted lead scientist Dr. Bruce Patterson and his team in studying behavior and ecology of lions of Tsavo, Kenya, Africa. Dr. Charles has also published his findings in many journals of international repute on different aspects of conservation, distribution range, niche dynamics, and impact of climate change on various extant plant and animal groups. With this brief introduction, I now invite Dr. Bipin Charles to deliver the 7th Dr. K.R. Surange Memorial Lecture titled Species Distribution Models in Paleobiography.
All right.
Good Dr. Charles, you can share your screen now, please.
Good morning to all of you, ma'am. Yeah, can you? Yeah. Good morning to all of you. Thank you, Director Ma'am. Thank you, the coordination committee, and Dr. Santosh and gentlemen for the lovely introduction. So today I'm going to present a small lecture on species distribution modeling in paleobiogeography. So I'm going to share my presentation. Hope you can see my presentation. Yeah. Thank you again for being the participant for the 7th Dr. K.R. Surange Memorial Lecture Series. Today my topic is species distribution models in paleobiogeography. Now, what is species distribution models? Species distribution models are nothing but the mathematical representation of a species realized niche in ecological space. When you say realized niche, each and every species, have a competition. Due to competition or the food resource availability or the mating resource availability, species are tend to colonize in a smaller area. For example, Nilgiri pipit, okay, a small bird which is colonized only in the central part of southern Western Ghats in the high altitudes. So this is called the realized niche of the species. And we are going to model this realized niche in an ecological space, and we subsequently project it back onto geographic space. This is the domain of the niche modeling. So interchangeably, this niche modeling and the species distribution modelings are used So it is it is one and the same, but people call it in a different names. Now, why do we need a species distribution modeling, especially in a paleobiographic field? So now we have, let's say we have an information provided by the fossil record now, which is subsequently used to build and calibrate the model that we use to predict the future. Now we need to try to understand what is the species fundamental niche or the realized niche in the past, like where it was present, where it was available, and how long it translated over a few years. Then how did the species respond to the climate change, and now how the climate change has evolved due to the human activities. Now where do these species tend to colonize or move away from the differently or from the field it is existing. Now how these interspecific interactions affect those niches and play out on the landscape. To answer all these questions, okay, the species distribution models or the species distribution modeling exercise is very crucial. So, as ma'am said, yes, that of course it is very upcoming field, new field, and it is growing very fast, and it is still more understudied, and there are still a lot of research required on this, and lot of scope for enhancements is there for in this field. Now, in this lecture series, I will give you a brief introduction, like what is a species distribution model is, what are the details we need to do or construct the niche models of a target species or a favorite species or the studied species, and then where do we procure those data sets from there, and what is the algorithm that we need to use, and how do we going to evaluate. Of course, since this is a very short series, it is very difficult to you know pull in the practical part of it. But definitely, if you have any questions to further take forward this research in your area of interest, in your areas, definitely you can mail me. I will provide you my email address on it. In the end, I'll provide you my email address in the end. Now, what are these species distribution models? These species distributions or models are nothing but the correlated model, which means they are related to observed presences of a species to values of environmental variables at those sites. For example, a species might have a different environmental impacts on the distribution. For example, a species is tend to colonize in the colder areas, some species are tend to colonize in the warmer areas, some species are try to colonize in the higher altitudes of the regions, or whatever it is, according to their preference or the food availability or the biotic and the abiotic environments. And also movement is also of course important. Now, what do we need to construct these species distribution models? We need to have a set of occurrence records. That means also called as presence only records. The presence only records are nothing but the direct observations of your favorite species on the ground, and where record your latitude and longitude of the species. Of course, you need to be correct or perfect in the taxonomic part as well. So you cannot identify or use the subspecies occurrence records or whatever it is, you will end up in biased model. So in addition to those occurrence records, you need to have some environmental variables. That is nothing but the climatic representations of the entire landscape that you're studying. It may be a temperature or precipitation or any other variables which you think that are directly associated with the distribution of your species. And of course, you need an STM algorithm. So that is nothing but it will be a small software which might either run on your Windows or on the R. So majority of them works on R. So there are about 45 different species distribution modeling algorithms are available in this world. So for example, ENN, then maximum entropy, which you might have been hearing for quite a long time, and then Mars, multivariate system analysis, etc., etc. So there are a lot of algorithms. There are totally 45, up to 45 algorithms are available in this world. Now, when you apply these STM algorithms with a suite of your presence only records and the environmental variables, you are going to get species distribution modeling on a geographic space. Of course, it is linked to GIS database. Now, on the ground, you will come to know like where the species might occur, or where the species have been colonized or tend to colonize in the current scenario, or in the past, or in the future, or whatever it is. And then like try to protect those areas, or try to conserve those areas to prevent the declination of, or the decline of the suitable habitats. Of course, on your right hand side you will see that the map of the Western Ghats. This is one of models of for one of the endemic species which is found exclusively in the central part of the Western Ghats. This smallest species is not found anywhere in the world. Now, if you see those areas in the red that are highly suitable, and if you see those yellowish and the light greenish are moderately and low suitable, and the blue areas are not suitable at all, which means that the species might not occur in those areas, and so there is no uh, interest from the conservation perspective. Now, I would like to introduce two key terms that are used for species distribution modeling. One is presence only data. If your studied species is located in the wild while doing survey, that means as I've already told you that you locate your species in the wild, and you can record your coordinates, and then use these distribution points in the algorithm. Environmental variables, as I said, it can be temperature, precipitation, or land use, land cover change, or soil pH, and those kind of things. In combination, you can use it plus your algorithms. Please remember, sometimes both presence only records and environmental variables are freely available. The presence only records are available in GBIF website, that is called Global Biodiversity Information Facility. All you need to do is you need to register yourselves through Gmail ID, and you can search your species and you can download those records. So in addition to that, you can also procure some of these occurrence records in published papers or peer reviewed papers, and and also you can collect through a team which is scientific. Okay, so through scientific teams you can collect all your presence only records. Of course, some environmental variables which are freely available, that I am going to share it in this forum, so you can freely use it and cite them in your research. Now, I'm going to introduce the species distribution modeling using Maxent. So out of 42 plus algorithm or 45 plus algorithm, whatever it is available so far, the maximum entropy, or in other words, it is called as Maxent, which was developed by Phillips et al. In 2006, became very famous. Okay, the reason is because this algorithm uses presence only records and do not require absence record. When I say absence record, that means, for an example, if you're studying for the entire Western Ghats for your particular species, that means you'll have to divide the entire Western Ghats, 16,000 square kilometers, into equal grid and visit each and every grid, and record the presence and absence details of the species. Now, first of all, I mean, to collect the presence only records itself is very difficult. Forget about collecting the absence record from the entire crop. So it is humanly impossible. So this Maxent replaced all the other algorithms by using background data. That means Maxent is going to generate 10,000 random points, which are treated as pseudo absence points, and it uses the environmental conditions of those background points with your presence only points and builds the model. So therefore, Maxent has become very famous across the world, and all the other modeling algorithms completely lost it. So now, what else? The Maxent is capable of doing a robust prediction. That means the models developed by the Maxent are very robust and reliable. So it can be used for conservation purposes, risk assessment purposes in case of invasive species, or if you want to plan for future areas of future areas of protection. So what according to IPCC says is that species are tend to shift their niches based on the climate change. Okay, some species might expand the distribution in future, some species might not expand, and of course some species are losing the habitats completely in the future due to climate change. Some species are recorded that it is going to be extinct in the future out of this maxent models. Okay, now it is very easy to use. All you need is proper occurrence records. It's not a very vague or manually assigned or whatever it is. So it is very easy to use. So you need proper occurrence records, and these environmental variables are freely available. You can use them and cite it. There are 13,000 plus citations for maxent modeling. Imagine how the field is growing. This particular algorithm achieved 13 plus thousand citations in about 15 years. So maxent is very powerful. And also, I would like to mention that maxent is not only used for flora and fauna; it is also used for disease mapping. Okay, so all the vector-based diseases such as malaria, dengue, and all these things, their maxent is used in the same techniques of species distribution modeling to study the future occurrence of these diseases, and as an advanced planning to mitigate those effects on human beings. Now, as I said, maxent requires background data. You don't have to worry about collecting the extra information. So all you can do is, once you have these proper occurrence records and the environmental variables suited for your species, uh, studied species, you can just directly go with modeling. Even with the default settings of maxent, you can get a very good, reliable and unbiased model within a small frame of time. Now, this is an illustration that I would like to show, like how maxent builds the species distribution models. Let's say we have a landscape divided into equal grids. Now, let's say this is rainfall. Now, this particular grid where the mouse is placed, that is positive for your steady relationship. Then the altitude, is favorable for the studied species, and at the bottom of the checkerboard, you will see the observations, which is this particular grid is favorable, is found on the ground by yourselves, and maxent would be able to predict those species. Now, let's say I do not know what is my species actual occurrences are. I do not know in the wild because it is highly restricted or very rare in nature. So what do I do in those cases? Don't worry, maxent will um, take care of it. Let's say this particular grid, this rainfall conditions is favorable for your studied species. This altitude is favorable for your species. Unfortunately, we couldn't go to this place and collect it because of permission levels, or the landscape is not accessible or whatever it is. But somehow through literature review or through experts, we know that in this particular grid of the landscape the species is present and maxent is taken care. Okay, so maxent will be able to predict those regions. So I mean to say, in a simple word, though if you don't have occurrence records from all the available sites, maxent would be able to predict those areas without fail. So this is another reason why the maxent or maximum entropy became more robust and more famous in these fields. Now here is another simple example, that is, in the present day scenarios, you have various 0.1, 0.2, 0.3 of your studied species. You have multiple environmental variables, that is climate, geology, soils, and you apply maxent algorithm, and you make a model or the species distribution model which shows the probability of occurrence. Now, for example, Maxent would be able to give you the outputs in this scale of minimum 0 to 1, which means that the probability of occurrence is 0 to 100%. Now we can apply the same thing to study the, invasive species. What exactly is going to happen for the invasive species in the future? Okay, whether it is going to expand the niche. If it is going to expand the niche, in which area it is going to expand the niche, that is most important. Okay, if I have a 100 rupees in my pocket and if I want to restrict the distribution of invasive species in the future, now where can I put my 50 rupees in those, in which area I can invest my 50 rupees so that I can prevent these, invasive species in spreading from the future. Okay, so these kind of, since the Maxent is capable of producing or developing the geographical model as well on the geographic space, it is very important, or it is very beneficial to monitor in the future. So you can project it into future, and also you can project it back to past data, and you can see from how the species have evolved from the past to current and current to future, how it is going to evolve. So you can study all these things, in a row. I will, in the further upcoming slides, I'll show you like how, uh, how many years back you can do the models of these kind of things. Now, to broadly classify, species distribution models will have three different steps. That is data collection and preparations, which is going to take 98% of your time. Model fitting and prediction, that is nothing but actual running the models once you have prepared the data sets and all the stuff inside the, and running the model in the software. That means physical use of software. And the model evaluation, so the model evaluation is built in Maxent modeling, so it's going to happen hand in hand. Okay, so you don't have to spend any extra time on it. So once the model is out, the model along with the evaluation metrics is uh, published, and you can use it for further analysis. Now, what are the different types of environmental variables we can use? We can use bioclimatic layers, which is also known as ecologically meaningful variables. And we can use altitude, slope, aspect, seasonal temperature, NDVI data, land cover data, soil pH, soil type, etc. So these are nothing but GIS databases, which is in the form of raster datasets and compatible with the Maxent model. Okay. Now, where do I get these environmental variables? So there is a website called worldclimate.org, which was developed by Professor Richmans and his team back in 2003 and 2005. So he was working extensively between 2000 and 2005, especially on this. I remember he was contacting so many people in ATRI, and like people were evaluating it. Okay. So this worldclimate.org will give you the current, the past, and the future data sets. By using the current observations or the present on the records, you can build the past, current, and the future models. Okay. Now there is another website called paleoclimb.org. Okay, the paleoclimb.org website was developed by Professor Jason L. Brown from United States of America, and is exclusively using this or dedicated this for studying the the past climatic conditions, and perfectly fit for species distribution models. Now, what are these bioclimatic variables? These bioclimatic variables are nothing but the mean temperature and precipitation, annual mean temperature and annual precipitation. To construct these models, what Professor Ijmans and his team did was they collected all the weather conditions, that is temperature and precipitation, for the last 40 years, and then they averaged it out, and in the using the some extrapolation techniques, they constructed these databases, that is bio 1 and bio 12, which is called annual mean temperature and annual precipitation. Once they have constructed these two models, they proceeded with construction of other bioclimatic variables. For example, bio 2, bio 3 to bio 11 were constructed using the annual mean temperature, and Bio 13 to Bio 19 is constructed using Bio 12 as an annual from the annual precipitation. For example, if you take the examples of dung beetles are very active during the wettest month, that is rainfall season, and then it makes a brood of ball, lay the eggs and bury beneath the soil and continue its life cycle. So if you see this Bio 13, precipitation of wettest month is quite important for the study of dung beetles. In those angles, these bioclimatic datasets were constructed to address the various floras and faunas of we find in the today's world, and construct models for these species. Okay, so that means in short, I would like to say this: these bioclimatic variables are the perfect fit for studying the past, current, and the future, because it is ecologically meaningful variables irrespective of species or taxa. Now, paleo data sets, it's very interesting. I know it will be very helpful for your teams. So on your left hand side, you can see that what are the paleoclimatic data sets. Okay, so now I don't want to confuse you. I want to be very clear here. The world claim or the world climate data sets as bioclimatic data sets, which I explained you in the previous slide. And these paleoclimatic data sets are also a bioclimatic data layers, which was developed for the past. Okay, but as a caution, I would like to mention this: please do not use these data sets for any of your climate change analysis. It is exclusively built for species distribution models. Okay, so this is for species distribution models use. So please refrain from using for any other analysis. Now, these paleoclimate data sets are available in various resolutions that are 10 minutes, 5 minutes, and 2.5 minutes. Of course, this is a GIS technical term. So to make you understand for the non-technical GIS people, uh, I mean non-technical. So 2.5 minutes is nothing but 4.2 kilometers, which means each pixel of these data sets corresponds to 4.2 by 4.2 square kilometer on the earth. Okay, accordingly, that means in a particular grid, if you say 20 degrees centigrade, uh, or if the data set reads as 20, that means 20 degrees centigrade of temperature is found to be in those particular grid of 4.2 by 4.2 square kilometer. Now 5 minutes is equivalent to 10 kilometers and 10 minutes is equivalent to 20 kilometers. I would suggest you use the 2.5 minutes. The finer the resolution is, better the model will be, and the better the plan of action will be for a particular species. Now, in the same world climate data set, okay, you get the past climatic data sets or the bioclimatic data sets, which are categorized into mid-Holocene, LGM, and LIG. Okay, so this mid-Holocene is about 6,000 years ago, and LGM is about 22,000 years ago, and last interglacial is around 120 or to 140 years BP. Okay, so here in this website, that is in World Climate Datasets, you have a different versions, version 1.4 and version 2.1. Version 2.1 has 2.5 minutes datasets, and version 1 has 30 seconds. That is 1 by 1 square kilometer datasets are there. Okay, so you can download them and you can construct your own models, and you can use it for your research. Now below is the citation for this particular data set. The future models, okay, the future models are constructed based on the world climate data sets that are present. So you can model for 2030. That means the average climatic conditions ranging from 2020 to 2049, and likewise you can model up to 2080, which means that where the species are likely to colonize between 2072 to 2099, which also means that you are going to plan the conservation strategy up to like 2100. Okay. So these kind of studies are very beneficial. Of late, these tools were recommended by almost all of the big organizations like IUCN, WWF, or etc. Whoever it is. And nowadays, these models are these models are used, very extensively in almost all the fields. Like as I said, like disease mapping, then the studies of floras, various faunas, endemics or threatened or invasive species or whatever it is. Now, finally, coming down to evaluation. So Maxent gives inbuilt evaluation. It uses the AUC, which is under ROC, called receiver operating curve. It produces statistics of range varying from 0 to 1, which means to accurately assess like how best is your model. And if your model is greater than AUC 0.7, you can definitely publish your research in various reputed peer journals. Okay. And then you can complete or you can plan your PhD thesis, or I know some people are already PhD scholars here, so you can plan PhD, or you can plan your research or whatever it is. Or people who are like want to guide future students can incorporate one of the chapters on the species distribution model. So if your final AUC is greater than 0.7, you can qualify for the publishing or the finalizing your thesis. There are some external validation softwares or the packages available, such as Kappa TrueScale Statistics, which are in R, which is more or less it will be equivalent to AUC values. So anyway, it is not mandatory; it is optional. Sometimes the reviewers or the external guides ask for more than one evaluation. In those cases, you can use these R packages for further evaluation of your models. Now, here is a reference. We have quite a number of good references here available for further studies. And this comes to the end of the lecture series. I do not know how much time we have. I was unable to track my time because of this expanded PowerPoint presentation. So if you have any questions, I can take quick 2 questions, and then I can share you my email ID. Dr. Santosh can share my email ID with you, so that if you have any further questions, you can drop a note. I'm happy to answer your questions.
I can't see any questions in the chat box, but if anybody would like to verbally ask Dr. Charles now online any queries from the audience, they're most welcome.
Yes, Dr. Motegai.
Yeah. Hi, Vipin.
Hi.
This is Mortek.
Hi, perfect. Hi.
Nice talk, actually.
Yeah, thank you.
I have one few questions. Like, this apart from bioclimatic variables, like topography, soil pH, land cover, they can also be used, right, to decide the occurrence of the species.
Okay. So
So now, do we have these variables available for the desired resolution of 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer, present and past and future? I mean, I just want to know bioclimatic variables are available. So are these variables also available for the 3 time scales, like present, future, and past, so that we can have better constraint over this distribution?
Okay, fantastic. It's a very good question, especially for the youngsters. We do not have the past, present, or future for other variables other than bioclimatic datasets. So bioclimatic datasets are the only option we have at the moment in our hands to predict the species distribution of past, present, and future. So we cannot use any other data sets.
Suppose if you want to include,
Mhm.
then is there any future work? I mean, current research going on, or if we want to do it, I mean, what is the scope? I mean, it's a very open question.
Okay,
Uh,
I know you're probing more deeper into this. Unfortunately, all these other data sets, for example, soil pH, land cover, or something like that, they need to go through the process of int casting. But at the moment, we don't have sufficient technology to do the int casting. Okay,
The chat box.
so as I said, so we don't have any option for using the land cover, soil pH, soil, something like that, for mapping past, current, and future, all the three. But if you are planning to map only current scenario, you can use any variables like bioclimate or
right.
soil pH or land cover change, or both. Yeah, both combination of bioclimate and the soil pH, land cover, etc.
Mhm.
But it is of no use, much use. It is only a limited research, I would say.
Right.
But definitely, bioclimatic datasets are the only option for studying the past, current, and future.
Probably it is our responsibility to have some proxy record or land cover or whatever it is. I mean, just I'm thinking about how we can do from our institute, like reconstructing the land cover or soil pH from some proxy record so that we can validate hand costing or whatever.
Okay, so I would say this would become very a long-term process,
True.
and because we need to contact experts across. For example, if you want to develop for India, you need to contact a lot of experts, and it would take a lot of ages to finalize these models, and and make it internationally acceptable or whatever it is. So I
Understand.
would say if you have 5 to 7 years of time, probably you can give a try, but I don't guarantee. I would say,
Understand.
yeah.
But
So
but we
yeah.
don't need to reconstruct for the whole globe. Rather than like we can specify a region in Indian, like some region, like
Mhm,
the central India, let's say, and then
mhm,
I mean, not necessarily to have a global data set.
mhm.
But that's also achievable. But anyway, of course, I understand what you mean. Like it's like a tremendous job we need to.
Yeah, yeah. It involves tremendous job, even for especially even if you look at the only central part of India. Again, it is a tremendous job, I would say.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Nice
Chat box.
question.
I don't see anybody asking any questions in the chat box, Dr. Bipin.
Okay.
I think probably Dr. Santosh Shah will share your email ID with the audience,
Mhm.
and if they can put some queries across, you may please answer them via your Gmail account or your email account. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Sure, sure. Thank you very much for that.
So, commencing with the program, thank you, Dr. Charles, for delivering such an informative lecture. I now request Dr. Santosh Kumar Pandey, who's a member Scientific Events Coordination Committee, to deliver the word of thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Vivesh. Now, I have a very pleasant duty to propose a vote of thanks on successful completion of this particular event. On behalf of Director, Birbal Institute of Creative Sciences, Dr. Vandana Prasad, and Scientific Event Coordination Committee, and my own, thankful to the staff member of the institution for online celebrating and memorizing 101st birth anniversary of renowned paleobotanist, late Dr. K.R. Surange. We are grateful to speaker Dr. Bipin Charles of Ashoka Trust of Ecology and Environment, Bangalore, for delivering the 7th Dr. K.R. Surange Memorial Lecture.
Thank you so much.
Any function could not be successful without the support of various authorities of the institution, and we acknowledge the support of computer, auditorium staff, welfare, photography, WNB, and website committee for successfully organizing this event. We also thankful to the registrar, Mr. Sandeep Kumar Shivhare, and administrative staff members for providing support to organize this event. Once again, on my behalf, I am thankful to you all of you for your presence in 101st birth anniversary celebration of late Dr. K.R. Surangi. At the last, I would like to inform you all the YouTube link for today's event will also be shared with you all via email in a day or two. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Thank you, ma'am, and thank you, organizing committee.
Thank you, Dr. Viven. Thank you very much.
Thank you.